Well, hello, everybody, and welcome to another round of the Essential Leadership Cycle. I'm your host and intentional leader, Rob Fisher, and today we have Daniel and Derek with us from One Shot Growth. Met Daniel and Derek a few weeks ago, really, and just loved what they're doing with leadership out there in the Permian Basin, out there in Midland, Texas. Guys, you want to introduce yourself and tell us a little bit about One Shot Growth does, and then we'll get right into it.
Yeah, appreciate the introduction. Great to be here, and thanks for having us. I'm Daniel Radabaugh. So Derek and I started up One Shot Growth actually as a marketing agency a couple years back, and it quickly turned into solving problems around kind of the stigma behind mental health in the oil and gas industry and communication problems that we were seeing within the different companies that we were working for. It started off just trying to earn a little bit of extra income and very quickly turned into that passion project that we've now, taken into a business and started scaling from it. So both of us are veterans. I'll let Derek talk about himself, but I did 12 years in the Army as a scout, and a lot of the problems and, things that we're seeing in the oil and gas industry are very similar to what we saw in the military. Employees being away from family and friends all the time, struggling with rotational shifts, coming home to their wife where they've been gone for 2 3 weeks and she's been the mom and the dad at the house. So just trying to help this industry really understand what they can do as an employer to help educate their employees on really taking care of themselves and their families first and foremost, but in turn, becoming a better company in the long run.
Yeah, good deal. Derek?
Yeah, I'm Derek Boyd, and like Daniel said, we started this business kind of over 20 years apiece in oil and gas, as well as our prior military background. I was Air Force veteran, and we actually met on a veteran nonprofit hike and just started kind of unpacking some stuff and becoming really good friends, talking about our experiences through the military and in oil and gas. And it just became so clear that we had a lot more to give back on the things we'd navigated through over the years. And like Daniel said, there's so many people looking for guidance and support in navigating some of these things, and we don't always get that. Oil and gas and the military as well is highly tactical, operational excellence, KPIs, everything's on a fast rhythm, and it's really easy to get caught up in the IQ process of staying on the top side of things, and the personal side falls behind a lot of the times. So you got your mental health struggles, your family challenges. So we started the business. We shifted into that. We both have entrepreneur experience in running businesses and kind of tracking out through 20 plus years of peace in oil and gas. We've seen things from the field side as a hand all the way up to the C-suite level, and just put our heads together and thought, you know what, we need to shift the perspective on this is a work or professional track only. We need to have a dual kind of lens that we look at this through and not neglect the personal side of who we are, which is the biggest driver really in how the professional side plays out. So that's what we started this company for. And we enjoy, or we appreciate you having us on here. Talk about this.
Yeah, no worries. I think us having the veteran piece in common and very similar. We're even seeing some stuff now with some of the military people talking about long deployments. And on one of the submarines that I was on, we went out for 5 days and came back 105 days later. So what that does to us and to our families, I think that when we first talked, there was a lot of good commonality and really from an essential leadership cycle perspective, the self and team awareness. What do we know and not know about this as leaders? What do we know and not know about this as workers, and what do we know and not know about this as individuals that have families, and we're trying to make our lives in a way that we can be good parents, good partners, and uh, good workers at all levels of the organization. So I really appreciated what you guys are doing. Um, and we do have a bit of a shared vision and value on that, in that our mission is improving companies and lives. And then there's a period at the end of that. And um, when you guys shifted over to say, yeah, this would be a great marketing strategy company, but the real problem is people aren't being dealt with well, and focusing on a single industry. So in your travels, in your work out there, as you start seeing and talking to some of the leaders, especially the executives, what are you seeing as some of the challenges that they either don't know are there from a self and team awareness perspective, or they may know exist, but they don't know how bad they are, and they don't know what they can do about them, so they just kind of don't do anything. So help with some of that.
So I think one of the biggest things that we've seen is just a lack of connection between your C-suite down to your lowest employees. There's multiple layers, right, of a business. You've got low management, directors, senior leadership, all the way up to C-suite, and everybody communicates differently. So
Yeah.
they may be getting that report, what's going on in their day-to-day operations, but what they're not getting is the "Hey, how are you doing?" response from the employee at that on that job out in the field. So that's kind of the gap that we've tried to fill on our end, and we do a lot of speaking engagements around this kind of stuff. And it's funny when you ask a group of senior managers and say, how many of you could tell me three employees that what their hobbies are? And crickets, you know. So that's kind of been or at least mine, the big waking moment is people don't relate their employees as actual people, and the driving backbone of their businesses. You need to get out there and actually know them and understand who they are.
And it's hard, right? I mean, we
Yeah,
can't blame, in the hop world, you have error is normal, but then the next one is blame fixes nothing. And one of the things that I've seen is we
absolutely.
almost shift blame to the leaders for that lack of knowledge. But the reality is they can't show up on a rig out in the Gulf,
Yep.
the C-suite. Yeah, it's hard to do that and run a company that is beholden to the shareholders and beholden to the employees and beholden to the investors and all of that. So it's a very difficult it's difficult to do that. And some of the conversations I've had with senior leaders like that, it almost they almost feel like I'm blaming them for not getting out and about and talking to them. But the reality is, um, they don't. I don't even know how to take the next sentence, Derek. Maybe you can take it from me, but to kind of expand on what Daniel was talking about.
Yeah, I think a big reason why we try to set this up with like a dual track approach, the personal side is usually so far lost in the equation, right? We're all showing up in roles no matter which part of the equation we're in, whether we're in the field or we're in the management, it doesn't matter. We're all people behind those roles. And I think when we've talked to anybody from any side, you're going to get the commonality that if they aren't working on the personal side and they're not having support to navigate the personal side, it doesn't matter if you're way up top or not. You're going to struggle with being able to effectively lead and work and serve other people. And I agree with you 100%. I don't think it's a blame thing at all. I think it's we're all humans first, and trying to fulfill things in everyday life that are really challenging to navigate if we don't look at the personal side with the professional side. And a lot of us just have our head down and we're busy blowing and going, and we've got direct reports to answer to, or shareholders to answer to, and just starting to have these conversations like Daniel was saying, you start to
Yeah.
ask those questions around what does that look like for you? And most people are so busy with the doing part that they're just haven't really had time to stop and think about that a lot.
Yeah.
I look at it real quick on kind of this lens, right? We all three of us were veterans. I know for me, and I'm sure with you two, I've had a brigade commander that stood out because he was a great leader and we all looked up to him, no matter whether we were a private all the way up to a sergeant major. So you don't have to be the one that's going to the rig and actually talking to the employees themselves, right? Yeah, it's great. Do your touch points here and there, make your rounds like you should, but you can still be that leader that's taking care of your employees by doing the right things with the managers that are underneath you and setting up
Yeah.
that process, right? So it, it's not blaming anybody. It's just saying, utilize what you have, better what you have, and take care of your people.
Well,
Be
and
genuine.
we say that everything starts with leader knowledge, language, and behaviors. If we don't teach them and they don't understand and accept, then they can't change their language and behaviors in a way that the people now see that this person is approaching something differently, so I can. We do a lot of work with personality diversity. We use e-colors and I think some of the companies you guys work with have used the e-colors to make sure that we're approaching people from a perspective that they want to be approached, as opposed to a perspective that we like to approach people or we like to communicate. So I think you're spot on that the different levels in the organization have different types of engagement to show that they care enough that we can um, kind of approach these mental health challenges that I think I don't know that they're any different in the last 30 years, but they certainly have surfaced differently. What do you guys think about that?
Yeah, absolutely. I think having these conversations in that level and kind of both military and oil and gas, you see a lot of technical ability for people to exceed and excel in their jobs. But when it comes to the leadership part, like you just said, there has to be process and training around the ability to manage people. And going from technical ability to managing people, that's a whole different beast. And when you can look at several teams with amazing talent and skills and their ability to work and overcome these things and solve problems, but then you start to ask questions about their leadership training and what kind of frameworks have they been through and what kind of guidance have they taken. Most of the time there's not been much, if any, there. And talking about mental health, it's a slippery slope because this hasn't been a comfortable
Right.
topic for many years that people are really just willing to jump in and unpack with the stigmas around it and all these things. So I think people have every intention, and companies and leaders want to do right by their people and they want to figure out the best way to approach this. It's just, it's such a new concept. Like you said, it's not that the problems are changing. This has been around forever. It's just that now things are shifting to a place where this has become loud enough where we can't ignore it anymore, right?
Well, and I think people care about it now. When I don't want to say they didn't care, but very often my wife and I'll have the conversation that, we were kind of left to our own devices. And she was a great military wife. She believed that I belonged to Uncle Sam. She knew that when she married me, and she was never going to blame me for something that the government was trying to do to me or us. and but she was rare. And the same kind of thing happens. And it's not just in oil and gas. I mean, the organizations out there that promote people on their technical competence, but never verify that that technical competence can actually even translate into some emotional um, uh, equivalence, some EQ knowledge, some uh, ability to both lead and manage people. Um, it's not verified, it's not taught well. And I'll say one more thing, then I'll turn it back over to you guys. I've always been a believer that um, everybody tries to approach this with coaching, but not everybody's a Bill Belichick or an Andy Reid. They're rare, but we try and turn people into coaches when they don't have that's not an innate ability for them. So, and all of those things impact the way they show up at work and they show up for people. What do you guys um how do you guys manage that piece in filling the void between the limited to no leadership training that frontline leaders and right above them get and what they really need?
You want to take that one?
There's not a there's not a right answer here, I think, and it's challenging, especially on both fronts, the military and oil and gas. What we see in oil and gas a lot, it's tough to have those conversations, I think, because reflection of the self leads to the ability. If you don't have the awareness of yourself, how could you have the ability to lead other people? And when you're looking to your peers, you're looking to your leadership for, okay, what does that look like and how do I get there? So few of us have really kind of been given a whole lot of examples and demonstration on it. What does that even mean? It's like we're just doing our thing, and 15, 20 years later, we look up and we've kind of had this experience, but how do we connect those dots? And that it's a really hard conversation to have while you're in the real time of keeping a business running that has to deliver, has to execute. And it is very uncomfortable. A lot of people aren't really, it's not on the forefront of priority to, for one, take a pause period and get out of the hamster wheel, right? Of tip of the spear execution. But then when you have that conversation, the personal side of it, to look at that personal growth and to train around frameworks and find what works for each person in a team, it's just not something that happens often. And so when you start to have those conversations, there's some reluctance there usually to kind of explore that, because it's like, well, where's the point
Yeah.
of reference? How do we have a reference point for what that looks like when this hasn't been the norm for so many years? We just kept going until we couldn't, and now things are getting elevated to where it's just become obvious that you can't have the professional side without having work on that personal side. And that looks different for everybody, right? So working with companies and leaders inside of teams, that's going to look very different for every company because they have different values, they have different structures in how they place their people. Some may have some advanced knowledge. There's some companies out here who have done a lot of work around, like you said, e-colors, and actually taking this into consideration. They're very aware that this is a topic that needs to be addressed often. And then there's a lot that have no idea what that even means, right? Zero
Right.
process, zero understanding of that. And so it's a long game for sure to educate. And Rob, I'm sure you've, in your journey of training the many people that you've taken through with your system, it's it just takes time, but you have to show up. And I like your processes that you guys use, because a lot of times people don't have a process or a framework to
Yeah.
follow, and they just don't know any better.
Yeah. And
Well,
when you
Lee,
guys go in, do you bring a framework that helps them get that started, Daniel, or um what's your kickoff? What's your elevator speech that you that you say, look, you need to pay a little bit more attention to this, and here's where we come in and help.
I'll take it back even one step further. The way that Derek and I have started to get the traction with doing what we do is through our speaking engagements, and we've been heavily involved with a couple different groups, Damage Prevention Council, well-being at work, and speaking on panels, doing our own presentations. But we've got a presentation that we do in front of, it may be 30 people, it may be 75, 200, that is talking about this. It's a communication discussion. And what we do is basically just go in and say, look at your staff, and I want you to tell me from our board that we show them, typically we'll use something like DISC, and just, you've got your driver, you've got your, analytics driven individual, and we kind of put that board up on the screen and say, dissect your team. I want you to tell me what your superintendent is. I want you to tell me what your office administrative assistant is. Tell me what your purchasing manager is. And then tell me how, your superintendent is going to communicate with your purchasing manager, being who he is. And how do you think your purchasing manager is going to receive that information? So all of a sudden, everybody starts seeing gaps and laughing. Yeah. And they're like, yeah, that's my guy. That's me. And once they get to that point, then we kind of unfold it and say, okay, now here's what right looks like. If you really set this up and you're setting the meeting up once a week, once every other week, and you're bringing the truth of these assessments into play and understanding how each other communicates, now all of a sudden we're being productive and we're moving the needle forward, and everybody's leaving the meeting happy, feeling like they've been a part of a team and they've accomplished something at the end of this. So,
well, and self and team awareness is the start of the essential leadership cycle for a reason. And it's also the thing that learning feeds as the end of the essential leadership cycle. Once we have learning and continuous improvement, we are more self and team aware as an organization. And I think a couple of things, just kind of unpacking a couple of things you guys have talked about, that I think people are more willing to have discussions earlier about, maybe they don't call them mental health challenges, but we call them triggers that indicate that somebody's struggling or that there's a vulnerability there. Um, and by identifying those, we're not waiting around until you're having to have really critical and crucial conversations on mental health, but trying to manage the precursors or manage the error traps around things that drive mental health challenges and wellness challenges. Is that kind of same thing you guys are doing?
Yeah, it's going in and having conversations around that. And I think you have to get in tune with each organization and each team to just see, have you guys done any kind of work around this already? What's worked and what hasn't? Let's kind of assess, what does that look like for you? If you don't know at all, then maybe we just start off with um, something on the lighter side of things and then kind of grow into some heavier engagement.
Yeah.
Like Daniel said, the speaking engagements for us are good ways to extract from the audiences the people in the companies who see and resonate with the message, and they approach us to kick off that conversation around what that looks like. And it's kind of sad that from an awareness standpoint, that really just talking about it at all is enough to get people interested in it, because
Or
so much
exciting.
of the yeah, so much
It
of
can
the
be
time
sad or exciting.
so much of the time it's not even on the forefront, right? So
Yeah.
before we get into the dynamics and the structure and the processes of improvement, all that, and the mental health side, just basic education around trying to connect with different people from different areas. And we just did a podcast with a therapist out here, just getting that information out to be able to talk about this out in the open without there being a stigma behind it, or
Yeah.
this isn't just talk therapy is not the only modality to help you. And there's a everybody has a different flavor and a style that works for them, and usually all
Yeah.
these tools work hand in hand together. So just we're in the awareness phase, especially in this oil and gas industry, where yes, it's been on the forefront. Some of the super majors have seen this for a while and they've been doing work around it. A lot of the others want to, they just don't have that frame of reference yet. So having that conversation with them is like, well, what is what does it need to look like? If this is just awareness in the first stage, then let's get you some awareness, and maybe you take some time to kind of um, mine the gold out of that and get some feedback from your people. And it's definitely it's a long game approach, because it's since it's not on the forefront, awareness I think is that first stage, right?
Well, and two things I'd like to kind of bring out of that. The first one is, and we may go off on a little tangent here. I appreciate that you guys are taking a more operational perspective than a human resources perspective. I think so much of this stalled out in human resources because if you don't have good self and team awareness, shared vision and values, and clarity of roles and processes between ops and the contractors and the operational side and drilling completions and all that and HR, and you're trying to do an HR thing, then it's almost doomed to failure. So they're doing a lot of work, but it's not getting to the right people. So I think the first thing is having that operational focus. So the languages for the people that are struggling, but also having those at the operational level, it allows us to communicate with the people that are really doing some of the risk. So a lot of the majors in oil and gas, a lot of the for for our listeners and people that are watching this, they're hearing their enterprise, not just oil and gas, but people who are in maintenance and construction right now are the highest suicide rates in industry. And so being able to have it at the operations level, at the coal face, at the wellhead, and being able to impact the other people that are there trying to support them, that's your subcontractors. And again, in the US and Canada, 85% of fatalities happen in organizations under 100 people. So being able to bleed out into that by having those discussions, I'll turn back over to you guys, but I think those two are some very important elements to what you're doing. One's the operational approach, and the other one is because of that operational approach that it can bleed out into the people that are really struggling alongside the folks that work for the majors.
I would like speaking at the excavation summit so much because it's everything from your backhoe operator all the way up to your, general manager, director, COO role. It covers all of them. And when you get a group from a company that comes in, 4 or 5 different levels of management plus the operators in one room, and we're speaking to them, that senior leadership's watching what their employees are doing and the faces that they're making when we're having these conversations, and vice versa, right? And it's kind of bringing them together. So at the end, we'll get a backhoe operator that lost his brother, or
Yeah.
had a friend of his, God forbid, just went off the rails and had some very big struggles. And being able to actually shake his hand and talk to him, and then his team and leadership who's in the same room is seeing that, all of a sudden that company looks at it and goes, there's something to this, right? And we've only scratched the surface in a 30, 45 minutes presentation that we've done. Now let's expand that conversation. Let's sit down with your leadership team. Let's do a full on presentation with the whole staff and really talk about this stuff more in depth. We always kind of start small group and then work into something much larger. But we had no problem coming out and doing a half day workshop with a department from a business and really
Yeah.
running that route first and then, you know, trickle out throughout the business as we go. But you're right. I mean, if we can affect and impact the low level all the way up to the highest level, that's the overall goal. Which is why
Yeah.
we do the podcast. I'm sure your podcast as well, right? It's meant to be a knowledge base for anybody and everybody that can benefit from this.
Right. Yeah, and I think that that light bulb moment where that leader that hasn't had much communication with that field worker looks at them and says, "That's the way it is." And the worker sometimes feels like, "How did you not know that?" And sometimes the leader thinks, "How did I not know that?" But that's when I love those light bulb moments when people that shifts them into, okay, what do I need to do to help you, and what do you need to do to help me? That clarity of roles and processes, and trust starts being generated very, very quickly. People think trust is we say trust needs to be developed, not demanded. That doesn't mean it takes a long time. It just takes the right things to be done. And just walking up to somebody and asking them, "How's your mental health, Derek?" That's not going to do it.
Right.
There has to be some mechanisms, some smartness behind it.
Yeah, absolutely. I really like your process that you educate people with and the companies, because just having this conversation period, when you start to ask those questions and unpack that, the pieces are so clear on your chart there about how this circle comes into fruition. And when you see it up on the board, there's so many environments that those pieces are very obviously missing, right? The self and team awareness, I mean, the very first critical piece. How could you get to a point of trust? Clarity of roles and processes. That's 90% of businesses that may not have the most
Yeah.
sound clarity of roles and processes. So between those pieces is, how could you ever get to a place to build trust without having those key elements there? And I'm sure you've seen in your experience on taking people through this, once they get their light bulb of seeing this kind of process unfold, it it it's gonna change things drastically in a pretty quick manner. Just going from not having anything to having this kind of awareness and knowledge around it's a game changer for how this plays out, right?
Well, and we use something called the gear model that says if you change leaders' knowledge and they change their language and behaviors related to that knowledge, everything starts to happen very quickly. But um, we tie workforce language and behaviors to leader language and behaviors through a belt of engagement. So, how does that leader engage instead of them being directly coupled? So, I'm doing this now as a leader, therefore you should be doing this. Um, we teach them to control the tension of that belt of engagement. And I think you guys are doing something very similar. Here's some suggestions on how you can engage to get the information that you need, where you can be knowledgeable enough to impact the things that could drive people's mental health and well-being and things like that. Instead of saying, go out there and ask people, "Are you okay?" I mean, that's fine, but two of the four major personality types aren't going to answer that question. They're going to answer the question they hear. So what's next step for you guys? Where do you go from here? I know you're scaling up. Um, tell the folks a little bit about what you're doing. We'll put your website at the end. Is it okay if they contact you through your website? Um, we'll put that at the end of the podcast. But where do you go from here? What's the big hairy dream um, of what you guys would like to see in a year or 2 years based on this path that you're on?
Yeah. So we've got a couple things going. We started a community aspect called OSG Access, and you can find a link to it on the website. What we're trying to do is bring more awareness around this. We've got a pretty good group getting in there so far, and it's basically taking this dual track that we focus on, the personal and the professional side, and really helping one another through that community and trying to grow. So it's becoming a network resource for us. It's becoming, we've got weekly drops that we put in there and have conversations around these different topics every single week. And we've sharing highs and lows, sharing, our commitments to the community that we're going to try and excel on that week. So we've started that. We've got our, obviously our speaking and, trying to get this piece of our business growing quite a bit has been a main driver for us. So we're always looking to come out and speak at different companies, you know, events, organizations, nonprofits that are out there really focusing on the message about taking care of your people and mental health. We invite you to contact us. We'd love to come out and present and, be a part of what you guys are sharing and pushing as well.
Good deal. Derek, what's your big, here's what we'd like this to look like in 5 years?
I think I think it's really challenging is you got your entrepreneur side and obviously you want to be successful in anything you do in being in business, but being a service driven leader and wanting that being the driver behind why you do what you do, we don't always just look at what's this equation supposed to look like from a monetary value. And we've talked about with you, Mr. Rob, there's a lot of things that you've done because you genuinely want to make that impact. You give it away because it's not because you're trying to promote yourself, but it's not always about I need to get the money, right? And
Yeah.
for us, a lot of what we do is just being kind of patient in this unfolding of what's happening. We are working on different things in many different levels with consultant work. We really are passionately enjoying being a bridge of communication gap with companies on talking about the mental health piece, talking about the assessment pieces and how the team dynamics can improve. What this looks like in 5 years is we want to make a change for the better for the state of teams and employees' mental health and get them to a point where this is not a stigmatized topic. This is not something that we turn a blind eye to. And we've got several different kind of routes of distribution to get us there in the long game. But I think you just keep showing up and you keep giving, and that's the driver behind it. I don't know where this will take us,
Yeah.
but it's a needed it's needed and it's something that we're never going to give up on, whether it's uh, slow drip or it comes on like gangbusters. We're going to be ready for it.
Yeah, very good. I mean, we used to say that we still say it today. We're more relational than transactional. We believe if we build the relationships, the transactions will come.
Absolutely.
And I think even doing things like this, where we start a relationship with you guys and see where that may go and grow. Um, Whatever we can do to help you guys in the ability to get what you have out to the people that need it. And I think also bringing the mental health discussions into mental health not being a condition, but understanding the elements that lead to being more mentally healthy, as opposed to talking about mental health challenges all the time, that putting a little bit more positive spin on it, like you guys do. Here's how you create a more mentally healthy environment, a more wellness related environment, um, instead of it waiting so long until there's so many challenges that it's unrecoverable, or you hear people that suffer and their families suffer as a result of it. Well, I
Mm,
really thank you guys for coming on. Go ahead. Go ahead, Daniel.
No, I was just going to say, and I'll say it. We're not therapists or
Right.
psychologists or psychiatrists. It's just a very passionate subject that we see
Yeah.
a huge disconnect in, and we don't come out and try and act like we know everything about it because we don't. But just opening yourself up to it and understanding that, hey, be a resource for your employees to guide them in the right direction. If they do wind up needing help, know the resources that you can send them to, and just be able to be an open ear as a person goes a long ways from
Yeah.
that start. But
Well, and kind of like you said, the way we show up as leaders for us, if you create an environment where we understand errors and violations and deviations are different. We understand how to manage our personal tendency to blame, and we understand that it's the systems that create the context that drives the behaviors. That removes an awful lot of stress from the work environment when people can come to us and tell us what the challenges are without the fear that we're going to react the way the organization has reacted in their previous 30 years of employment. So I
absolutely.
really appreciate what you guys are doing. Just you have one more thing that you want to tell our listeners before we get out of here?
Yeah, just take care of yourself and take care of your people. I mean, that's what it all boils down to for us. You know, realize that whether you're on the entrepreneur path or you've got a 400 employee business, it doesn't matter. You've you've got to wake up every day and say, I've got to take care of both my business and my personal self. So whatever that looks like to you, we'd love to share some resources with you, but take time for yourself, take time for your families. It's real easy to get in that grind every day. And next thing you know, you're working 7 14-hour days a week and you're burnt out and your health is just going out the window, right? So,
Yeah,
highly recommend just putting intention behind both sides of it together.
love intentionality. Derek, you want
Absolutely.
to close us out?
Yeah, we appreciate you having us on, Mr. Rob, and it's been a huge blessing for us to interact with you and some other connections that we've made through the result of getting to know you. And I think that's the biggest piece for us that we've seen that is valuable is just having conversations with like-minded people and seeing what comes out of it. There's so many different things that could come out of it in different ways, and just being tethered to people who are rooted in serving other people is huge. And you have so much to learn. We all have so much to learn from each other and our processes and our systems and how we go about doing things, and just opening the door to being willing to connect on that level across the spread brings so much value in putting yourself out there and saying yes to those conversations. When a few weeks ago we didn't know who you were at all, but
Yeah,
now here we are and we've had some really great conversations, and that will snowball into other conversations and introductions and connections to other people. And you just never know unless you show up what that's going to look like. And we really appreciate you bringing us on the show and having an opportunity to talk about what we're doing out here.
no problem. I appreciate you being here. And huge shout out to Ian Collins for putting us together. Ian Collins of
Absolutely.
Wellbeing Daily, just constantly connecting people. Just a great guy and a great organization. And appreciate you guys having appreciate you guys being here. And we're going to close it out. And remember, intentionality starts with you.